Right. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dr. Michael Short. We are joining you from formerly Spring Lake, London. Winter appears to have returned. It's our pleasure to host this relatively short session for you. I'll just take you through what we're going to do this afternoon. We're going to do a number of things, but first of all, could I introduce my colleague Varsha? Varsha, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, so I'm Varsha, and I'm currently studying the Sustainable Urbanism program. Ethnically, I'm Indian, but I'm actually from Japan, and I did my bachelor's in architecture in New York. So I'm excited to share what life is like in the Bartlett School of Planning.
Thank you, Varsha. We look forward to hearing from you shortly. As I say, I'm Dr. Michael Short. I have a number of hats on today, the main one being I am the postgraduate tutor. In other words, I have responsibility for all of the master's students in the school and all of the programs that we run. I'm also a program director of the two-year M-Plan City Planning Master's program as well. I also teach on 2 or 3 of the master's programs. So hopefully between myself and Varsha, we can answer all of your questions. What I'd like to do really is give you a little introduction to UCL and the Bartlett School of Planning. I want to talk to you about our master's courses very briefly and to do a little bit of a taster lecture. And I was just thinking about what that might contain, but really thinking about 2 concepts that we call wicked problems in planning. One being this idea of place and its use in planning and in the wider built environment disciplines, but then in specific, how we relate that to conceptions of density and densification. I'll then hand over to Varsha, who will give you some of her own thoughts and ideas about the student experience and her own experience at UCL. And then I'll open up the floor to questions and answers. I'm hoping those 2 parts, us talking and the Q&A, are roughly similar length. In the background is our colleague Sonia, who will both drop relevant links into the chat as we go, as I mentioned, and Varsha mentions things, but also might be able to help us if we need some more information. So anyway, so again, welcome to the Bartlett, welcome to London. As you're probably aware, UCL is one of the world's most famous higher education institutions. We're poised in a year's time, or slightly less than a year, to celebrate 200 years since our founding. And there's a number of salient features about UCL that are really interesting to us as staff and students. Firstly, it's the second in the UK for research power. So we're a research-led and research-intensive teaching institution. We've got 11 academic faculties, have had 30 at the last count Nobel laureates, and at the last count about 440,000 alum in more than 190 countries. So hugely exciting, dynamic place to work and study. There's a couple of other things that I think are really interesting about the university that underpin its ethos. One being that it was the first secular university in Britain. In other words, this was the first university to allow people who weren't Protestant people to go to university, and it was the second university in the country to allow women. And actually, that I tell you that because it's one of its foundational kind of sets of principles, but also that equity and egalitarianism underpins a lot of the way that we teach and study at the university. Likewise, the School of Planning is more than, I think it's about 110 years old, 109 years old this year. It's one of the oldest schools of planning in the world. It's also one of the world's leading research-led planning schools, with an international reputation as a centre for academic excellence in research, teaching, policy and practice, interaction. And it's worthwhile saying that all of the staff kind of balance those 3 things in their daily lives. So myself, teaching and research, but also I work in practice as well as a planner and historic buildings conservation person. Our staff body is international, both in its makeup, but also in our outlook. So you know, we work across boundaries, across borders. Many of us speak more than one language, and we engage with hugely diverse sets of issues and cases globally. I show you, this is a bit of a name drop here, show you a picture that was taken in November at the World Urban Forum in Cairo, where myself and Dr. Lucy Natarajan, who's wearing the kind of orangey red jacket on the left, she and I led the UCL delegation to the World Urban Forum to discuss issues really around community engagement, which is an area that both she and I do a lot of work in. Just as an example of the kind of work that we do and the fora that we're engaged in on a daily basis. What I wanted to briefly do next, and forgive me, I've got notes for this bit just because there are so many of programs to talk about. I just wanted to take you through each of the programs that we run, and obviously I can answer questions on that afterwards. If there's any detail in there that I'm not aware of, then obviously I can engage with the relevant program director to support your questioning. So firstly, the Housing and City Planning MSc, I guess we can start by saying that shelter is one of the most basic human needs. Yet few governments have adequately addressed the development of sufficient housing that's the right type, the right quality, and in the right locations. So this master's course provides critical perspectives on the role of planning policy and practice in the development, financing, and management of housing, and strategies to reduce environmental impact of housing. This is designed for urban professionals and graduates seeking to specialise in housing development. Our infrastructure planning, appraisal and development master's programme rests on this idea that successful infrastructure projects have the power to deliver important services to populations while tackling global and economic, environmental and social challenges. This programme is designed in collaboration with leading infrastructure practitioners to equip you with the necessary skills and knowledge to create holistic, robust and sustainable infrastructure projects, preparing you for a successful career in infrastructure planning. Thirdly, our International City Planning Masters, run by my colleague, Professor Sonia Abachi, provides an international perspective on planning systems and cultures, urban theories and local practices, emphasising comparative understanding across different national contexts. This accredited planning master's degree prepares you to take career opportunities across planning practice, policy and consultancy. With a strong network and practical field experience, graduates are well equipped to drive sustainable urban development globally. Nextly, our master's program in international real estate and planning prepares you to build your career in real estate, planning and urban policy. The real estate and planning master's degree explores that relationship around the world, so it's a global focus. You will study the systems through which real estate market operates and consider market mechanisms from the perspective of investors, developers and occupiers of the built environment, and the relationships between markets and policy at various geographical locations and at spatial scales. There's another few yet to go. The next masters, actually the two are linked, both the Spatial Planning MSc and the Spatial Planning Degree Apprenticeship, equip students with the skills to address complex planning challenges and develop sustainable, resilient communities. With a focus on strategic, integrated and inclusive planning, this urban planning degree prepares you for a successful career in city and regional planning, policy development and related fields. The degree apprenticeship element is designed to advance that career in planning for existing professionals, blending the spatial planning degree that I've just described with supported workplace learning and practical experience. This programme specifically meets the UK government's Chartered Town Planning Apprenticeship Standard, so successfully completing the course will award you both a Spatial Planning MSc and Chartered Town Planning status. So moving on to Sustainable Urbanism, which is the programme that our colleague Varsha studies on, brings together urban sustainability theory, policy and design to tackle the impact of rapid urbanisation on the environment and society. This urban planning master's degree is designed to teach you the multidisciplinary skills and knowledge ready for a career in the built environment, focusing on urban sustainability or sustainable development. Next, the Transport and City Planning Masters blends cross-disciplinary insights on transport and urban planning. You'll engage with global debates and innovative strategies addressing the transition to sustainable urban mobility, seeking to understand how transport can support the sustainable city. Engaging with sustainable mobility trends, theories and international case studies, you'll develop a comprehensive skill set preparing for a dynamic career in transport and urban planning. Moving on to the Urban Design and City Planning Masters, which I used to run a few years ago, just for your information, equips you with a multidisciplinary skill set crucial for careers in urban design, city planning and their related fields. You learn to use urban design as a creative planning tool understanding the interplay between urban design and city planning. Combining theoretical knowledge with practical experience, you'll be well prepared for roles in urban planning and design, with opportunities in public authorities, government agencies, urban design practices, consultancy firms, and also international organizations. Only two or three more. No, two more. So the penultimate program run by my colleague, Dr. Sonia Freire-Trigo, addresses the challenges of urban decline and the planned recovery of our neighborhoods and cities. This urban planning masters prepares you for a career leading urban regeneration efforts in neighborhoods, towns, and cities. You'll gain essential skills and knowledge in the governance, planning, design, and management of urban regeneration projects, considering human, financial, and governmental resources and the impact on communities. An additional interesting and exciting thing to note about the Urban Regeneration Masters, and Sonia, if you could drop this link into the chat, that would be great, is that the Royal Town Planning Institute, with an additional fund of the British Chambers of Commerce, is offering a one-year full fees scholarship for this program for a home full-time student for the coming academic year. So that's 2025-26 for the RTPI fully accredited route on the program. So that's hugely exciting that we've managed to attract that scholarship. So please do engage with that. And if you're applying for the Urban Regen and you're eligible, please apply for that scholarship. Okay, finally, we'll end on the program that I run myself, which is the two-year Masters in City Planning. This program is designed to provide you with a solid foundation to build your career in city planning. During this degree, we encourage students to think independently and critically about city and regional planning challenges, studying both spatial planning, comparative perspectives, gaining a wide understanding of how to address planning issues in the UK and internationally. And I think before I move on to the short lecture part of the presentation, I think it's worthwhile saying that all of our programs engage with both UK and international perspectives. The balance of those depends on the program, but just to kind of reiterate that all of our teaching reflects the research excellence that we as academics undertake. I'll say a little bit more about that later, and maybe Varsha can speak to that diversity in the classroom as well, or answer questions on that. So I don't want to terrify you all on day one, but I will mention Lefebvre, Henri Lefebvre. But I start this as, so really in essence what I'm trying to do here, and this is relatively short, is to maybe think about how certain concepts underpin how we think as city planners, but also that it's really important that we interrogate what those concepts mean so that we don't normatively assume that each of us understands the same thing about those concepts and that we can use them appropriately when we're planning cities for the future. Anyway, not in too much detail, but thinking about and the reason I've chosen place as the initial concept to talk about is there's really, there's a whole literature around how conceptions of place underpin planning strategies, but that those conceptions of place aren't really articulated very clearly. So in other words, the language, there's a kind of seductive language used in planning around the things that we want to see, but a real lack of interrogation or definition about what those concepts actually mean in reality. And you can see in the background there, hopefully it's not too faded, a project out in West London in Southall, a new high density residential development in a relatively poor part of the city that's predominantly private housing that does not meet the local housing need. And I chose that picture really because of all of the branding and billboards around the site talking about the creation of this unique place in West London. Anyway, Lefebvre suggests that we as planners, architects, urban designers produce spaces and places through three related dimensions. And I'll take each of those in turn before talking about density. So the first one that he mentions are material-spatial practices. In other words, the experience of space. So physical and material flows, transfers and interactions that occur in and across space in such a way as to assure production and social reproduction. And he gives us an example, maybe the production of physical infrastructure, territorial organizations. So in other words, if we're talking about planning, who has responsibilities and competencies in planning? How are they territorially organized? I guess an additional thing to think about here is whether there's any conflict between different spatial scales of territorial organization. And I'll show you a picture of a train, but also of well, yeah, I'm trying to think of something positive to say. A vision for high-speed rail in the UK that hasn't yet been realised, he said very tactfully. But also, you know, a material spatial practice of visioning a future state of being is critical to the creation and understanding of place. He also talks about the perception of space. In other words, how representations of space are outlined. This encompasses all of the signs and significations, codes and knowledge that allow such material practices to be talked about and understood, and talks about, you know, new systems of mapping, visual representations, forms of communication, artistic and architectural discourses are all ways in which space can be represented. And I chose this picture mainly because I was teaching about it this morning. This is a proposal, it must be about 20 years ago now, for the Fourth Grace in Liverpool, which is in the northwest of England. You can see in that picture, bottom left, the old three graces, so the kind of three buildings that define the character of Liverpool. And just to remind you that part of my academic background is in the historic environment, so interested in how new buildings might be negotiated in historic settings. This was a proposal for the Fourth Grace, in other words, a fourth icon of Liverpool around the time that Liverpool became European Capital City of Culture, which I think was 2004 from memory. It might be 2007. I'm not very good with dates. But anyway, this is a visualization, so a representation of a future space created by Norman Foster, where he and his team, in essence, sought to convey an image of Liverpool. The concept behind this is Liverpool's maritime heritage, and those of you who can see it, the front of the building, so in other words, the low-rise ground scraper bit is meant to reflect a Liverpool-built ocean liner. So this is just really as an example of how we might represent future visions of space and place through, in this sense, architectural discourses and design. And then finally, he talks about the imagined. So in other words, interventions that imagine new meanings or possibilities of spatial practices. So things that might be incorporated within that idea are utopian plans, imaginary landscapes, science fiction ontologies, for any of those interested in science fiction, mythologies, poetics, spaces of desire in its broader context, etc. And you'll see that this is Le Corbusier's proposal for the ville contemporaine. Excuse my French accent, it's terrible. So in other words, his concept for the contemporary city. And again, I use this as somebody with a historic city background because this was his utopian plan and vision, an imaginary, if you like, for the right bank in Paris, which is the most historic part of the city of Paris. So this was an imaginary around believing that planning, architecture, and design can help create utopian spaces of the future. Okay, so that all sounds great, but how does that relate to actually what we think about in the classroom? So thinking about place and how that might be defined as important, but in placemaking, one of the things that we've been doing recently in one of my classrooms is thinking about how does density as a concept and densification strategies either encourage, implement, or otherwise conceptions of place. And it's a really interesting, so I mean, I'll talk a bit more about the class in a moment. But what's really interesting about it is that the studio environment that we use to explore this as a creative space. So in other words, it's not a kind of traditional teacher stands at the front lecturing, students write everything down. It's more of a discourse and a dialogue between the different participants of the studio. And what we really seek to do is not only do we interrogate ideas of place and in a critical way, but also interrogate, in this instance, issues of density. And I won't read that out, but I think what's really interesting is that we go from a position where most planners in planning contexts use numerical measures of density to try and somehow improve a particular place, a site, a neighborhood, whatever. But actually, our thinking has started to move very much away from those numerical quantification strategies for density. And I suppose what sits behind that is this kind of very lazy idea, I would say, that somehow if we increase density, that will somehow improve the sustainability of a place. So in other words, the idea being that if you introduce more people in a particular location, somehow that's going to make it more sustainable. And actually, there's a huge literature on this that talks about how there's that lazy analogy between the two is actually quite destructive. So whenever you come across any plans or planning strategies that use these ideas of place or density, be really aware of what that might mean or whether it has been defined in any way. And that's what I put there really, is that somehow higher residential density is considered to be an important attribute of sustainable urban form. I think in addition, I'm going to talk too long here, aren't I? I think one of the additional things that's interesting is density is often only ever viewed in relation to residential density, but what about job density? What about leisure density? What about the density of mixed uses, for example? But people like John Punter, who just retired recently from the University of Cardiff, talked about higher density can being the operative word, jeopardize good urban design and sustainable communities. So there's actually real tensions between how we might understand the concept academically and theoretically and how it's used in practice. And our job really as academics is to try and bridge that gap and to try and improve practice to create more sustainable communities in the future. And then there's this kind of really interesting idea from the last 25 years or so that's gathering steam, that actually quantification is reductive in the sense that you and I experience density in very different ways depending on who we are, where we're from, what cultures we belong to. So, so I'm from Newcastle in the far northeast of England. The high density in Newcastle would be very different from, I'm looking at Varsha, who grew up in Japan, or if we think about Shanghai or one of the Asian or African megacities. So actually that kind of the difference in where we perceive and experience density, I think, is a really interesting area to explore. And then I'll just close this kind of very, very mini introduction to those two concepts with two pictures of places that we interrogate in the studio. Some of you may know that this is Vancouver. This picture's a little bit old, actually, as it happens, but I really like it. So that's why it's in the lecture. And really, I show this because Vancouver is very famous, as some of you may know, for a type of urbanism called Vancouverism, which is a set of principles really that were developed in the 1990s onwards that sought to develop the city in relation to its natural context. You'll probably see a number of characteristics just in that picture, one being the water. So to the left, the Pacific Ocean. To the north, you see the mountains kind of framing the city. And then it's to the south, but on the right-hand side, you can see the very flat plains to the south of the city. And actually what's been really interesting about, so I've done quite a lot of work on Vancouver, is thinking about the way in which those principles of Vancouverism have sought to densify the downtown historically. That's changed somewhat recently. While somehow reflecting the link between the water, the land, and the mountains. So there are very strong protected view corridors in the center of the city that seek to maintain that visual link as a characteristic of Vancouverism. Actually, in more recent times, one of my own students on MPlan did her dissertation on this last year, where actually the suburbs are now densifying very rapidly, partly as a result of the extension of the underground network. Well, it's not really underground and overground network of mass transit. So this idea of transit-oriented development and this kind of soft density where plots naturally over time densify and attract more units. And then maybe more humbly, I take you on a journey to my home city of Newcastle. I don't know if any of you know Newcastle. If any of you are in Newcastle, let me know and I'll give you a walking tour. Newcastle, a city of 2,000 years old. was a Roman fortification 2,000 years ago, has a very rich tapestry of architectural and planning history. It's a very compact central city. So you see those in urban geography, you call it a palimpsest. There's layers of history over time on every street. And this is a development that won a few awards. The name of the architect is Ashkula. And she and her team came up with this brownfield a redevelopment, which is medium rise, medium density, as a solution. So thinking about how often in planning strategies that seek to enhance place through densification, we see the eponymous tall building, the skyscraper, etc., the height of which differs in different parts of the world. But actually the contention here is that human scale, so a natural human scale, certainly in a European context of between 4 and 8 stories roughly, is actually a much more natural way to live at higher densities. Of course, there are critics particularly with this development, as there was no car parking incorporated. So you see cars parked on every corner. So there was no car parking incorporated in the development. There's a metro stop about a 10-minute walk from here, and I think it's a bit of a tragedy personally that there wasn't a better strategy for public transport provision here. And then in the background, for those of you interested in architectural and planning modernism, you can see a red and white triangle shape. That is the very famous Byker Wall, Byker, which was a 1970s regeneration of a very poor working class part of the neighborhood, designed by a Sweden-trained local architect. And again, great to go and see if you ever get the chance. 2 more slides from me, then I'll pass over to Varsha. One of the things I said earlier on is how our research informs our teaching. This is a bit of a grab of some of the stuff that I've been involved with. But in essence, you see the bottom left-hand side, the Planmaking Studio, which I run for M-Plan students, really draws on all of the stuff that I presented today. And you can see some of the publications there, which have been produced by myself and colleagues on the issue of density, the issue of financialization and densification, etc. So, and if any of you are interested in that, please do look it up. This feels like I'm promoting myself. I'm not in the way that you might think, but really what I'm saying is that one of the very strong features of our work as academics is the link between our research, our publications, our other outputs, and our teaching, and the kind of engagement of students in live, relevant work streams. Something that I always recommend students do, this image was from last year, so it's actually out of date. You'll see that I was on holiday when that picture was taken, so I'm tanned. But actually what I'm trying to show you on here is all of the staff who will be teaching you. So program directors for whichever program you're applying for, and all of the staff on the modules have UCL staff pages. You'll see at the top, under about, where it says about, there'll be a spiel about what we do, our job, etc. Under the publications tab, you'll get to see what we've been writing about recently. What's been published, where it's been published. Most of it, not all of it, most of it is open access. So you can start to get a sense of what are the kind of issues that we think are relevant are being researched. You see a research tab, which kind of defines the research areas that staff are interested in, the expertise and experience that we have, and also the teaching. So one of my recommendations when you come out of this session is to have a look and play around on our web pages to see what the staff are up to, what kinds of, to get a sense of what kind of material they'll be drawing from in the classes that they take. So thank you. I will now pass over to Varsha. And Varsha, I'll just make sure all your text is on the screen before I... Yeah. Great, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Michael, for your lecture. And I hope everyone who participated today actually gets an understanding of how our lectures are. Every day in UCL is like this. You are always interacting with a treasure trove of knowledge where whoever you talk to, not just your professors, but also your classmates. So just to reiterate, my name is Varsha and I am originally from Japan, but I completed my undergraduate studies in New York City. So moving to London for my postgraduate studies has been an exciting and also eye-opening experience. So life in London is truly unique. These pictures actually I took when I walked around the campus. So I actually did get a bit lost, but even if I got lost, I actually found a new place to stroll by, like Chinatown. I didn't know Chinatown was close by. I was just walking, I was just trying to figure out how to go back to my place. And then I just started walking, and that whole picture was all these four pictures were taken in the same day. So you can see how the day I walked a lot, that I actually spent around like 3 hours around the campus and also just exploring London, and it was really fun. So that's just to say that wherever you walk, you'll always end up at like a famous landmark or something historically significant in London. One thing in Chinatown that I do want to share is the good all-you-can-eat hot pot deals, which I'm a really big fan of. So please do enjoy that. So talking about food, UCL themselves, they have a lot of campus. There's like a lot of options on campus with cafes. So whenever, like, let's say, I did come with the notion that every day I will cook, be healthy, and etc. But sometimes I'm just too lazy. So when I go to school, I'm able to actually get food that is really enjoyable. It's not just rubbish. It's really good. UCL is really focused on sustainability, so their food is also really healthy. And also, every Thursday, there's this thing called the farmers market, and variety of cuisines. People just come there and do a market, cook there kind of stalls, and you're able to experience like an international diversity, not just in the campus, but also outside the campus through food. And talking about student experience, I am the student representative of Sustainable Urbanism. I'm a student rep, and as well as I'm the Bartlett ambassador, and I'm also a sustainability ambassador. So all this is just to show that there's a lot of opportunities. There's a great range of societies and clubs catering to all kinds of interests, from sports to arts to sustainability. There's even a society club actually for bubble tea. So if you're interested in bubble tea, there are people there willing to like talk with you. A whole club just for bubble tea. And other clubs that exist are like Indian Dance Society. There's a specific dance society just for the Indian community, but there's also a dance society separate from the Indian community. So there's just a lot of things to do in UCL other than just study. If you're worried from today's lecture that, oh, there's a lot to study, I don't think I'm gonna keep up. Don't worry, everyone's like in the same pace as you are, and there's several things to enjoy here. UCL actually in every Wednesday afternoon is given for this type of time for like clubs and everything. So you most likely would not have classes in Wednesday evenings, but rather you would have more events such as for clubs and so on. So yeah, anything else that I want to share? Volunteering experiences. So UK as a whole actually values volunteering, and UCL has a lot of opportunities that be to help you be involved in volunteering. I actually went to this place called Cody Dock Restoration Volunteering, and there I did this project for urban ecology where we went on bird walks, and I also was able to make a prototype for tracking mammals on the river Leah. So it was a really fun experience. I didn't know there was actually they made like materials, they made stuff to actually track mammal movement. So something I was interested in ecology. I wanted to understand what ecology was. So volunteering gave me such a hands-on experience to understand what that idea is. So yeah, I just wanted to share those aspects about how there's several ways other than just academics for you to be engaged in UCL's community. But let's go to academics and also talk about that. One thing I recently went on was the field trip. So I believe every single course has their own field trips. And yeah, thank you for that thumbs up. So yeah, every single course has their own field trip, and my course, Sustainable Urbanism, we went to Glasgow, especially Glencoe, where I was able to see the Highland cows, the cows with the fringe, and also learn about peat coring. Like I didn't know coring was actually a thing. I don't need. I'm also assuming many people don't know what I'm talking about coring. It's basically you dig into the ground and you twist it and you're able to see the landscape, the history of landscape through how the soil is coloring. And so you'll see like a darker soil and becoming lighter. just it gives us an understanding of how uh, humans impact the landscape. So it's not only just academic, your field trip, you're also able to go out and enjoy. Like we were able to go through around Glasgow. I was able to see Glasgow School of Arts, a famous university there. Go to University of Glasgow because I'm a Harry Potter fan and I was able to wanted to see like that kind of architecture. So there's a lot of things that UCL offers, including career services, who are amazing. They provide personalized career advice, internship opportunities, and even job hunting support. And I've personally found them really, really incredible in guiding my career aspirations, especially for a person who came from Japan and then got used to like the US job market and coming to UK and understanding like, oh, there's different methods. Like there's something called the graduate scheme, there's something called graduate jobs, there's something just jobs, internship, apprenticeship, so many different things that I wasn't aware of before. But now, thanks to UCL's career services, I was able to learn more. And I want to give time to you guys to ask questions. So I'll just end with the note that if you were curious about life here at UCL or have any specific questions that is like tailored to a specific program, I highly recommend checking out the UniBuddy platform that UCL has. There you can connect with students like me who are more than happy to chat about our experiences and answer any questions you might have. We are always here to help. UCL is always here to help. Everyone is willing to share their experiences. So yeah.
Thank you very much indeed, Varsha. Just to reiterate, UniBuddy is a great mechanism through which you can connect with existing students, and I know our students involved with that really enjoy it. So just to, I want to close with these pictures. These are my own pictures of graduations that I've been to with my own students, and I end I end the kind of the lecturing part of the session intentionally on this, really as a mechanism to try and convey to you how much of a privilege it is for us to teach at UCL, but also specifically to teach you guys. We get the best students in the world, the brightest students in the world, and it's an absolute honor and privilege to teach you. So hopefully you enjoy some of those pictures. You might also note that I do have the best robes of the academic members of staff in the school. There's no discussion about that at all. Okay. So listen, we've got 20 minutes or so. I note there's already a question in the chat. What I'll do is, as the questions come in, I'll answer them as much as I can and defer elsewhere if I can't. And I'll read out the person's name as well, if that's okay, just so that you know that I'm answering your question. I've just run out of water. 1 second. Okay. Firstly, a question from Charlotte Gallagher Squires. Hi, Charlotte. I'm wondering which of the courses you would say most engages with the theory and practice of community engagement and participatory urban design and planning. What courses have the most opportunities for us to gain soft skills in facilitating these community engagement processes? It's a very good question. Community engagement is one of our core specialities in the school. Depending on your interests will depend where you might approach this from. The Urban Design and City Planning Masters specifically has a core module in this area. Having said that, all of the other master's programs have the potential to take electives, and one of those sets of electives are community engagement. So I guess it depends from what perspective you wanted to approach the community engagement. And just as an example, if that's useful, I teach on the community engagement module for the Urban Design and City Planning program. And in that module, we work with a community, an umbrella community body called Kilburn, One Kilburn, not Kilburn One Kilburn, where we develop a community workshop, which actually took place at the weekend. And really that module rests on this idea that often in planning, knowledge is produced in certain ways, and knowledge is, I guess, seen in particular ways. In other words, whose knowledge is important in planning processes and whose knowledges are ignored. So the idea of the module is that actually is one of listening and learning from communities to drive forward agendas around planning. I hope that answers your question, Charlotte. By the way, just generally, I'm very happy to meet with people outside of the meeting to chat through anything in more detail. And if I can't answer it, I'll put you in touch with program directors. Charlotte, from the perspective of improving procedural and distributional justice. Yeah, so exactly that. But there's 3 or 4 modules in the school that do relatively similar things, but from different perspectives, if that's of interest. Moving on to a question from Claudia Alvazzi. Hello, Claudia. I'll just read out what your question is, if that's okay. Oh, it's disappeared. Hang on. Sorry, 1 second. The way I understand it, the MSc Urban Design and City Planning integrates higher urban design component than the M-Plan City Planning, which I'm assuming would make it easier to work in the field as urban designer. Would this type of career still be an option, even with a degree in the M-Plan, or is this degree exclusively suitable for working in government? Oh, okay, that's an easy question. So the UDCP, the Urban Design and City Planning Masters, is a master's set up. It's a year-long program that interrogates planning issues through the lens of urban design. There's no requirement for design skills going into the program, but obviously the design skill requirement in it is much higher. So the learning curve is quite big, although it's not insurmountable. Lots of people do it, etc. The M-Plan City program is not an urban design masters; it's a 2-year planning masters. But my background is design from a planning perspective, so there's a strong theme of urban design in it, and you can also take urban design as an elective specialism in the M-Plan as well. And there's lots of urban design modules to choose from in those specialisms. So maybe the question is one of whether you have a year or 2, what's the kind of tone and approach, if that makes any sense, Claudia. Naman Mangla, thank you for your question here. You're welcome, Claudia. Is the MSc International Real Estate and Planning suitable for an Indian student coming from a real estate family business set up in India? Would the curriculum be beneficial if do not plan on doing real estate internationally, but just in India? I'm not familiar enough in terms of locations where people go to work in relation to those students. Certainly the tone of the International Real Estate Masters is international, and the staff who teach on it and who run it are international members of staff. I mean, I think, Naman, I might put you in touch with Professor Chulin Kerr, who is the program director, who could potentially speak to you in more detail about India specifically. Varsha, I don't know whether you're familiar with anything in relation to real estate in India at all. Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
I'm not aware of any real estate in India specifically, but I'm thinking about the students who do real estate here in UCL, and it is a global perspective, not like just specifically only for India. So you do get the chance to learn about other aspects. Of course, it's just going to be knowledge that you're learning, and you could implement in India rather than, be like, oh, this is not suitable for India, so therefore I'm not going to apply it in India. You could bring in these knowledge like, hey, they're doing this in Germany, I could do this in India, somehow tailor it to India, and so on. And there's this one course that I'm doing right now called Sustainability Property Valuation, and that's something real estate students are also doing. While it's not a technical course where we are actually doing calculations, you get an understanding of all the concepts like just transitions and circular economy and these kind of concepts. So it's more about learning and getting that knowledge of what you can implement rather than being really specific for India, or it's not really specific to a specific European state, European country. So it's just knowledge. So the aspect of international, if you're worried about it being too international and you're not able to apply it to India, that's something you don't have to worry about.
Thanks, Varsha. I've just realized there are 2 different sets of chats, so I've just seen the other one. So if I just go through those questions. So a question from Grayson: does the Bartlett School of Planning offer paid graduate student instructor positions? They do exist. They're not formalized in the sense that it's usually around particular members of staff having work to do. I know several students who do work with colleagues on projects, and I have 2 at the minute. And then secondly, does the MSc Transport Planning have any internship requirements? I'm not sure what that means. I know several of the students do work whilst they're studying. If you're an international student, there are limitations due to the UK government. I think it's 20 hours per week during term time. That's the limit. Outside term time, those limits don't apply. Does the planning department offer assistance for international students in finding internship opportunities? The career service with our own internal career service do help, yes. Ian, hello. You're very welcome, and thank you for confirming I do have the best robe. I'm just going to read out what you've said. As I already have a background in planning, having completed a bachelor's degree in urban studies and planning. Ooh, where did you do that? Would you recommend the M-Plan City Planning course over other courses if I'd like to get into urban design? I was concerned that material covered in M-Plan would overlap with what I've already learned in my undergrad. It really depends where you did it and what the content was, Ian. Just remembering that M-Plan is 2 years rather than 1. I mean, if you're interested in urban design and you already have a background in this topic, potentially the urban design masters might be good. If you wanted to do a 2-year program, then of course you'd be welcome. Oh, you went to Sheffield. I did my master's in Sheffield many, many years ago. Thank you. Dervla, hi. Would you be able to speak a little bit about what is involved in the Just Space project? Oh, yes, absolutely. So Just Space is an umbrella organization in London that seeks to bring community groups together to help them navigate, I think probably is the best word, the planning system and plan making processes across the city. It's a really interesting organization. We as a school have had a long-standing interest in the organisation, and indeed several of the board members are members of staff. A large number of our students work with Just Space every
Me
year.
too.
Oh, do you, Varsha?
Yeah, I
Yeah, do you want
actually
to say something?
volunteer with Just Space right now. So there are several projects going on where you get, I remember someone asking a question about the community engagement. So this type of volunteering could really help you with the community engagement aspect. Basically, we went on site and talked with the residents of the area and tried to understand what their needs were. So currently, there's this place called North Acton, which is in the Old Oak Common, and that's the project that I'm doing, where we are trying to design active transport means, such as a footbridge over the station, and then a cycling path, a better cycling path, because there's already one existing, but it's really narrow. So basically, we are a volunteering group of students who work with who work with the staff that are engaged with Just Space, and just provide what the community needs. Even the simplest of like creating a website that has all their information. They have like a lot of paper data, and just transcribing them and digitizing them is also a part of Just Space. It's a really good opportunity to understand how planning works in a practical sense. So yeah, it's a good opportunity if you're looking into that as well.
Brilliant. That was fortuitous. Thanks, Varsha. Kambu, how long can prospective students expect to wait to hear back after submitting their applications? Okay, so I think I'm bound to say between the aim is about 6 weeks, but it takes about 6 to 8 weeks depending on when it is you apply. Bearing in mind the end of term is coming up and the national Easter holiday is coming up as well. So it just kind of depends, but roughly 6 to 8 weeks, I would say. Johnny, sustainability is brought up a lot. I'm assuming this doesn't just mean CO2 emissions. That's correct. What other sensors? I think, well, sustainability conceptually is something that we explore. So what does sustainability mean? So it's again one of those normative planning concepts that is ill-defined and often never defined in planning. I mean, Varsha again is on the sustainable
Yeah.
urbanism, but from my perspective, I think about sustainability in terms of neighborhoods fit for purpose. So not just the individual building, but kind of the widest city and creation of city is something that I think about personally. Varsha, I don't know whether you have any insights from your program.
So sustainability is not just about the environment, there's like the economic aspect as well. So we look at the finance aspect of how we can make things more accessible economically, how to create it inclusively. And sustainability also looks at people. So the main focus of sustainability is not compromise the future generations. So you're not just looking at like, oh, we're going to emit, how can we sequester all these carbon emissions that will damage the future generations, but it's also about how we can create like a better life for them in the sense of economically, economically, financially, and even institutionally. Like if you're creating a school, what kind of things would you want to teach them? Would you like to teach them about sustainability from the beginning? Like, hey, you have to think about finance in this way, you have to think about the social aspect in this way, because there's a lot of risk nowadays with the overpopulation, that people, there's like more buildings being built, and because of that there's a risk of people being displaced. So how do you like move forward into the future through the built environment without risking people, existing people and future generations lifestyles? So
Hmm.
yeah.
Thanks, Varsha. There's quite a few questions to get through in 8 minutes, so I'm just going to speed up slightly. Michael, you've asked a question about whether there are any volunteering opportunities given your tech skills. Yes, mostly through Just Space. I did see another question somewhere about Just Space. Just to say that we introduced Just Space and its opportunities at the beginning of the induction and first week of term, so we don't advertise that online. Charlotte, again, is there a scope to audit modules for free within the wider Bartlett School? Yes, there is, although there's a couple of caveats. One is your timetable. The second is one can audit with the consent of the module leader. Obviously, certain modules aren't available because of their content and the way in which they're delivered, but in general sense, yes. An anonymous question about what are the main differences differentiating the M plan apart from the extra year. I'll say this relatively quickly, but please do reach out and we can maybe have a meeting outside this session. Obviously, it's 2 years long. The dissertation is a much bigger piece of work, so it's 15,000 words and takes a year. And actually, one of the pathways through M plan is to do a PhD. In the second year of the second term, you can either study abroad or take a placement, which is the only program in the school that offers that as part of the program diet. And there's a few other things which are a bit smaller, but in essence, they're the main things. Another anonymous question about personal statements. How specific do we have to be about our career goals? I think if you think it's important, then you should put in what your career goals are. Just a more general point on, oh, Varsha, thank you. Varsha's just dropping in a link to the UCL website on volunteering, which I didn't know about. Just a more general point on personal statements. Really, when we get, as admissions tutors, get to see applications, this is going to sound really obvious, but the main thing that differentiates applicants is their personal statement. There's no really way of putting this in a less blunt way. A lot of the personal statements aren't personal, which sounds very odd, but are kind of, we get lots of applications where personal statements do not reflect any personality of the applicant. What we want to know is, why have you chosen this program? Why now? And what will you bring to the table? We don't necessarily mean that in you don't have to have a cognate disciplinary background to be able to do that. But I suppose my personal advice would be avoid very bland statements that don't reflect who you are. So in other words, make your statement personal. I hope that helps. Adam, could you provide some information on the the BSc? Adam, I'm sorry, this is for postgraduate teaching, not undergrad, and I don't teach on any of the undergraduate programs. Sonia, I wonder whether you might drop in a link for Adam and also potentially Elena Basusi's information, who's the undergraduate tutor. So in other words, my equivalent. Hopefully that would be useful. Thank you. Efua, hello. For the MSc City Planning and Urban Design, what type of design practices are explored? Is there a mix of model making, 2D and 3D? Yes, basically. And live work on sites as well. Isabel, which are the main differences in the practice between sustainable urbanism and international planning? Varsha, would you be able to respond to that one?
Sustainable urbanism is more of my focus, so I can explain about
Yeah.
that. But about international planning, maybe Dr. Short is much more
Yeah, okay.
knowledgeable. But sustainable urbanism, you have the aspect of sustainability, and there's also the aspect of urban design focus. This year we have started looking into both an urban planning and an urban design route. But the idea basically is that you learn about all the sustainability concepts that is related to planning, such as circular economy, adaptive reuse, retrofitting, um, several things that are not coming to my mind right now. And as I said previously, there's also the focus on finances, like looking at economical sustainability, educational sustainability, social sustainability. And I'm thinking about what else could be talked about. And it's also looking at the landscape, basically, of the world. It's trying to understand how we have worked on this planet and how we can move forward in a more sustainable approach so that we are not compromising the future generations. Yeah.
Thank you, Varsha. Isabel, if you could just drop me a line, I'll put you in touch with Hui, who's the program director, and Sonia Obachi, the international planning director, who can help you a bit more with that, if that's useful. I'm going to be really quick. There's a few more to answer in the 3 minutes we've got left. Cameron, you mentioned, sorry, your question is mentioned a training period for non-cognate degrees. In essence, what that is particularly for design skills. So a training period for upskilling in relation to that. All students need to do it. Yeah, so that's it in essence. Yes, it is amazing. Ian, oh no, not Ian, Spencer. I'm sorry about that. I'm not sure why it tells me that you're called Ian. You were attracted to the M plan because of the opportunity to do a work placement. Where have previous cohorts of students worked, and does UCL provide assistance in securing a placement? So I do all of the placement securing. So you've got the right man. So this year we've got 14 students on placement and 5 on study abroad. In essence, those jobs that they go to span the whole arena of planning. So we've got people at GLA, private practice, local government, the third sector. We've got 2 this year working in academia, so one of whom is working with myself and one working with the director of the Urban Regeneration Programme. Both, in essence, because both those students are interested in working in academia in the future. So really it's kind of, in essence, what I do is I interview the student, see where they want to go and set it up. Usually that's not a particularly big problem. Johnny again, hello. How much of each course is focused on the public side, policy and neighbourhood level planning versus private development planning? I mean, I would say apart from the real estate masters, we very much come from a neighbourhood planning community approach to planning, in general terms, basically. Another question, do students participate in ongoing research projects? Yes. Some students work with colleagues on research projects. So that is usually relatively ad hoc, although there's quite a few students each year who do. Monan Wang, you're a new student in international real estate. Does the school arrange internship opportunities? No. Does we help you with them? But no, we don't, in essence. Valfried, you're very welcome. How does the timetable structure look like? Do classes go from Monday to Friday, or do the timetables vary? They vary. It depends which program. It depends whether you're a part-time or full-time student. We have all classes are between 9 and 6, Monday to Friday, at the minute, although I'm sure the university will start to use more times during the week. Okay, wow, it's literally just turned 3:30. I think I've answered every question so far. So really, Sonia, if it's okay, I'll close the event. Somebody just dropped a question. Isabel, you're very welcome. I'm just going to very quickly check I've answered everything. I think I have. But well, first of all, can I thank Sonia for arranging the session? That's very kind of you. I do hope everyone thought it useful. Varsha, in particular, I really appreciate your time and energy in helping answer the questions and in presenting your student experience. And to all of the audience members, please do reach out to students through the UniBuddy app. Our own students are really good at responding to individual queries about student experience and their own experience of teaching and learning here. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions, meet any of you if you have any specific questions. I can direct you towards program directors if they're of a detailed nature, but do stay in touch, and we do hope to see some of you, if not all of you, in September. Thank you very much for your time. Goodbye, everybody.